it seems that we're live. So welcome to this session on building a learning ecosystem with total learning architecture approach. I did my session yesterday on end-to-end learning platform and talked more about Valamis. So hopefully you were able to attend that as well. Also greetings from Finland. I'm based here in Joensuu in East Finland, where we are headquarters for company Valamis, and our learning platform Valamis is. You can see it's pretty dark here, so otherwise I would show you again the snowy landscapes that we have. We just got the first snow here, but it is 8 o'clock in the evening and it's pitch black, so there isn't that much to see. But I'm going to walk you through this session today and actually start from high level sort of strategic view and then go step by step quite deep into the topic of data and total learning architecture. But just to sort of get an introduction to everybody that wasn't in the yesterday's session, my name is Janne Hietala. I'm the Chief Visionary Officer here at Valamis. Valamis is a learning technology company. We have a comprehensive learning platform for larger enterprises and organizations that combines things like learning experience platform functionality, learning management system, as well as data analytics capability and built-in learning record store, just to mention a few. I've been in this role for quite a long time within the company, driving new kind of initiatives, strategies. I've been able to work really with the best companies in the world, in my mind, in a lot of these interesting R&D topics, and that have really influenced how we then develop the technology and the platform Valamis. So working closely with partners, like-minded partners that have sort of that research mindset has been important, that we're able to produce and create an operationalized platform that's then useful for a lot of different kinds of organizations doing digital learning and doing blended kind of learning programs. Obviously, data of learning has been gaining importance over the years more and more. There's been different standardization initiatives to support that. You probably heard a lot about XAPI. You're probably very familiar with SCORM and AICC. I'm going to talk about sort of the next step in having a unified data architecture around XAPI and learning record store, and what are some of the practical applications of that in total learning architecture. So this is a concept and project by ADL. If you're not familiar with ADL, I recommend you to sort of Google them, but they're behind these standardization initiatives like SCORM as well as XAPI. So I'll just jump into today's topic. I need to give you a warning that we will go into quite deep and murky waters, but that's fine. One of my peculiar hobbies is free diving, and I like diving in lakes, and done a couple of dives in under the ice here in Finland. So you're in good hands. So let me start at the strategic level, and then we'll work around into more in-depth topics. So this is really sort of up-to-date information, what we are seeing in post-COVID and how that's influencing organizations, their L&D. Reskilling economy was very much in motion before COVID already, but this has significantly accelerated. So the question is that, do we actually have the people with right skills in the organization? Do we have to go and acquire the skills and the talent from outside the organization? Or can we identify and provide sort of employment mobility within the organization? And what is the cost of all of this? So one of our long-term goals has been to make learning and reskilling economically viable option for organizations. And technology has a huge implication and impact into that, but especially the data and the evidence that we're able to provide, that what are really the successful reskilling programs, what is the type of engagement that will drive these skills within an organization. So I'm going to be showing some practical examples around that, how to do that. So just the recent report, I spotted this from Joe McKendrick. He wrote an article in the Forbes, and he referred in about the study commissioned by Microsoft and done by BCG, that what are really the implications of COVID into organizations. So what companies and organizations have seen is the productivity of their work has gone up while moving into remote work and digital work much more, but innovation has gone down. So pre-COVID, there was a lot of emphasis on engagement. So we got things like learning experience platforms that drive that aggregation of content, personalized learning, engagement with content. But that's not alone enough to drive more in-depth immersive learning programs. And we've been working on this for several years, for example, with NASA, helping their EPIC Challenge program and other similar programs to drive much more complex, immersive, almost like a blended learning programs that take elements of that micro-learning, learning by doing, project-based learning, and things like phenome-based learning, and then analyze the data around those to understand that how can we put together teams, how teams do learn in organizations in reality, how they solve specific problems, and can we get data about the team composition and team dynamics if they actually will be successful solving some of these challenges and problems. So in order to address this problem, we need much more variety into different kinds of digital learning initiatives. Everything still needs to be digital, but what organizations are struggling is empowering those teams and empowering collaboration using tools like Teams and Slack. That's great, but then having data and evidence to understand how these organizations need to be restructured to actually enable innovation and collaboration at this level. I'm going to be talking more about that later as well. So again, important topic, which is a must for this environment. The learning needs to be well integrated. It needs to be consistent. It needs to be seamlessly accessed and consumed in the flow of work. So more different learning systems you have in place that people need to go and find and log in, more disconnected those learning experiences will be, less effective, there will be less engagement and poorer experience. So trying to integrate things like Teams, using chatbots into these learning environments like learning experience platforms are important initiatives to get the access to people and availability of learning resources in the flow of work. So we've been working around chatbots and the use of conversational AI in the context of learning in the flow of work over several years now, and it's now sort of picking up quite quickly, and it is quite important development topic for a lot of organizations. So the big data for learning, it's a big buzzword, and you've probably seen a lot of different kind of XAPI learning record store presentations. But we like to understand what are the different data sets available within the organization. So you can think about, you have learning data sets, learning experience data sets around learning record store, you have skills frameworks and skills data, you have broader HR data about the organization structure, the job roles, the performance of organization and employees. You have social data and communication data, and you have a lot of operational data, what's going on actually in your organization. And we'd like to call the combination of this the organizational behavior big data. Essentially, when we look at learning impact, we need to have more than just the learning data. We don't know just purely from learning data, what is the behavior change, what is the output, what is the learning impact into the operations side. And we don't know really the dynamics of teamwork in virtual collaboration, for example, unless we have understanding of the communication data. So it's a good frame to think about organizational behavior big data and how important actually learning data is in that equation. So like I mentioned, that organizations are now launching more immersive learning programs, and this has the risk of disconnecting that learning experience. If you have one place for that micro learning, one place for more programmatic learning like leadership courses, then you do your training events and training event management in your LMS. This just gets into a mess, which is really difficult to manage and get a consistent data view around this. But this is essentially what's now needed to drive up that innovation and collaboration. So people need to be immersed into collaborative learning programs. So one of my good friends, Dr. Charles Comerda, that we wrote a paper in digital transformation of learning, talks about massive open online projects. So not just MOOCs, but MOOCs, and that's a term he coined into this kind of programs. And we've had a very interesting experiences around running this kind of programs together with NASA and some students around the world, tackling challenges like sustainable habitation of Mars and other really interesting challenges. In Europe, we work with Copernicus program in creating climate-proof societies, which sounds really cool. But if you're more interested in that, you can find more through Google or ask a question later on. So overall, COVID will force organizations to reassess their L&D strategies. So total learning architecture is a good place to reference right now that you are assessing these L&D strategies again, that what is the strategy around data? And that's where the TLA will actually help to think about, are we instrumenting the content and the delivery of the content and learning experiences in the right way? Are we bringing that outside data into that mix, into that big data of organizational behavior? And how we're actually analyzing that data, and what are the questions we're trying to ask, and what are the actions we're trying to do as an outcome of those analyses and reports. So overall, reassessing the L&D strategy for data collection, measurement, and redesign of learning experience is a crucial part to do right now. If I step back a little bit, and this is just from the annual 2020 Workplace Learning Report from LinkedIn Learning, highlighting top 3 areas of focus, strategic areas for focus. So evaluating learning impact, impact of learning in the organization and business, increasing learner engagement, enabling self-directed learning with online learning solutions. These are all data-driven initiatives, but there are challenges regarding that. So when you start these data-driven initiatives, they're complex, and complexity across both knowledge barriers, organizational barriers, who owns the data, how that's aligned with business side, HR, L&D, who actually gets to have the full view of the data. There's a lot of trouble around defining metrics. So how can we get an alignment that what are actually the metrics and the measures of the learning impact that we're trying to do, and just getting an agreement, alignment on that is a challenge. And at the same time, there's a lot of overlapping different solutions that have part of the puzzle. They have part of the data, integrating all that data from different kind of data models all together into the consistent data framework that doesn't really exist currently, that you would have a singular data standard to describe everything around that organizational behavior big data. So it's a really difficult challenge, and this is what's called solution fatigue, that there are too many overlapping, seemingly similar solutions. And essentially this will lead into a lot of crashing and burning projects inside organizations where they sort of start from this perspective. So what we recommend for a lot of organizations, when you're looking to renew your learning platform, or either it's from LMS side, LXP side, you're looking at learning record store, or you're just launching new kind of learning initiatives with your organization, it's important that you start capturing that good quality data from the beginning. So it's not yet the outcome that we need to do some KPIs or measurements or learning impact. You need to have a history of data available. That data needs to be consistent, it needs to be high quality. And no matter what you can do today, and if it's just outcome based, you're launching a new leadership program, take a look and understand what kind of data will be available from there, that make sure that you have the data available later when you start looking into this analysis and designing the KPIs. Having that data available is crucial and hugely important, because if you start measuring today and you have a certain set of KPIs in mind, it will take significant time before you're able to see any kind of outcomes and results out of that data. So if you already have 3 years worth of data, it's a very different starting point, asking different questions and doing analysis and discovering things that you didn't even know that were important at this stage, but just surfacing interesting insights from the data. If it's being consistent, it's incredibly valuable. And we've been able to do that. So I'm going to talk a little bit more how we've done that. So if you're not familiar with XAPI and learning record stores, these are just acronyms that L&D tech people throw around. You don't have to be worried. This is a tool. I'm not XAPI fanatic in a way myself. I like it because it provides the consistency of describing sort of these listening touch points and sensors that we place around different learning platforms, learning content, how that content gets consumed and experienced and delivered, how different learning systems and tools operate. It provides a standard language how we describe these activities happening. So that's really useful when you care about consistency of data, but you don't have to go in. It gets very, very technical when you dive into these XAPI specs and everything else. Long as the platform has been instrumented and you have a control on the content side, how the content is instrumented, you're already quite far away in the using XAPI. And then learning record store, it's just the place where you put all these different statements. It's the big data repository for all these different learning activities happening within an organization. So if we just simplify this a little bit and we think about different data sources for learning record store and learning analytics, we can think about mobile apps in organization, different learning apps, and how they would then generate statements out of these learning interactions and engagements happening within the organization. You could be doing VR in the organization. Have you been able to instrument that VR experience? It will send these statements, descriptions of what was happening in that learning scenario, in the learning exercise, in the VR, in the learning record store. If you're using things like learning paths in your current solution, you're building curated learning paths for certain job roles in certain learning moments or learning journeys, you can instrument that with XAPI and pull all that data in the learning record store. Same that you just launch your traditional training course from the LMS, you're able to capture that information. So a lot of this responsibility, how this gets described using XAPI, actually relies on the shoulders of vendors. And maybe to give a little bit of feedback to different vendors, they're not doing as a good job as they should be on using and leveraging XAPI. So it's really lacking the consistency, how that's being used across different solutions and how in-depth information you're able to get. And then you have sort of typically very high level XAPI information at the same level as you would get from the traditional SCORM about completions, attempts, and things like that. So XAPI can be much more versatile tool of instrumenting really carefully, but you have to sort of have a plan that what you're trying to get out of that. So as part of this session, we have provided you the workbook Data of Learning, which helps you to map out these learning journeys and understand what are the questions that different roles and personas trying to answer, what kind of data needs they have, so you can start thinking about how the XAPI can be leveraged actually in as listening and collecting the right kind of data from these learning journeys and learning experiences. So again, just introduce the total learning architecture. So this is putting together the approach of leveraging XAPI and understanding what are the different data sets that you have in the organization and combining that with learning record store as a centralized data storage for all kinds of different data sets. So that's all good and well, but very often these are disconnected systems. So if the content instrumentation doesn't really, is not really consistent with what you're trying to get out of the LRS, then you have a separate solution for learning record store. You will be just wondering what all these statements are all about. But when used the correct way, and I would say that the correct way is the hard way, that you just understand these different learning scenarios and different tools you have in place, you're able to improve the quality of the data instrumentation, and you'll be able to benefit from that learning record store data then by leveraging things like recommendation engines or doing business specific recommendation algorithms, doing better learning analytics, AI solutions, different reports and dashboards based on that. So better quality from the left side you're able to get, the better outcomes you're able to deliver on the right side based on that data. So maybe to jump into the data of learning workbook, and we've simplified a lot of the tech stuff that you would otherwise sort of dive deep into the XAPIs and statement generation and context activities and everything else. You can think it from your organization perspective. So you have certain roles, certain needs and archetypes within the organization. You've all probably been doing this sort of role mapping, understanding the personas within the organization. We have an exercise called empathy mapping that we do with our customers to really map the learners' archetypes and their journey throughout the platform, that what are their needs and pain points. But this takes a look from the data perspective. So you can start by defining name and the goal and key challenges and a few open questions for these specific personas, and then starting to drill down on what are actually the data needs and the reporting needs and the actions people look to do based on those reports. We've seen RFPs where somebody has asked a list of 400 different out-of-the-box reports because they have a lot of admins, and the admins are required to generate these reports and report these back to the rest of the organization. We'd like to ask at that point quite often that, what is the action you're looking to do based on a certain report? So are all reports necessary, or are they just for sake of reporting? Or what kind of decision is being made based on the data analysis and visualization that has been done for that report, if it's actually useful or not? So in this data book, you'll see different examples. So here's just a couple to get you sort of mind rolling on this. So we have a persona, Logan, who's an instructional designer. He really wants to create an quality learning content that helps learners learn efficiently. His key challenges is to understand if the learning is linking to the business needs, really to keep motivating the learners, keep them engaged, understanding if the content has any effectiveness, and then understand that where the people are dropping off, or if there is sort of unmotivated people, or that's just you have wrong kind of context for certain learning content. Not everybody will be engaging with same content over same kind of situations in their careers. So that person will ask typically some of these questions. So how can I improve training programs? Do employees enjoy learning these learning programs? What paths do users choose in their learning? So how they will navigate through the learning platform, learning journey, things like that. And then the question is that how this all will improve the measurement of learning impact. So some thoughts around that, and then going into what kind of data is actually needed. And then from there, you can deduct that, okay, these would be reports that based on the data we should use, provide, and what are the actions based on those reports that this person would actually do. And you can have this exercise with as many different roles in the organization you see fit. When you move into the business side, the data requirements will get more and more complex and complicated. But at the same time, it's a good check that in your current learning ecosystem, in your learning environment and L&D strategy, if you have these personas mapped out, to ask these questions from them that, do we actually have the data in one place? And are we able to produce these reports for these personas that helps them to make these decisions? If not, then looking at, can we get that data somehow? Is it just disconnected, or is it split between multiple different systems? But what you will find out, the learning data is unfortunately very fragmented. This is also part of the issue of where we are in learning technology cycle. Different learning technology vendors have specialized a lot of different solutions. And I think Josh Bersin has done a good job categorizing these different players in different categories. You can agree or disagree with him on this, but I like sort of this understanding that what are the strengths of different platform providers in all of this. But essentially you have specialists in learning experience platforms, program delivery platforms, you have specific microlearning platforms, you have a lot of content libraries that have their own learning functionality around different assessment VR development tools and so forth. Then you have this in the flow of work tools like Teams and Slack and G Suite and Office 365 and different digital adoption tools to go with that. Your myriad of different traditional LMS platforms that are expanded into full HCM suites. And then you have your learning record store vendors as well. So all this is separated. All these are different systems. And if you look to build an ecosystem, you're looking at 5 or 6 different systems. And this is not even counting in the different content authoring tools that you have. So you might use tools like Articulate or Captivate or Lectora. There are various other different tools, and they all play a role in that data view, how the data gets, how the content gets consumed, how the content gets distributed, aggregated through LXPs, how the system of records operates in LMS, and then trying to analyze all that from Learning Record Store. So that's really tough. Excuse me. So we've had this approach over the years to build actually what's called end-to-end learning platform that combines all these features into total learning architecture ready platform. That in the Valamis platform, we have learning management system capabilities starting from bottom. We have our own built-in learning record store. We have program delivery platform capability, microlearning capability, content curation authoring tools, and the full LXP capability, which we are the best known for. But these are all in the same platform. So we are able to do different types of learning scenario, from microlearning, from personalized learning, into that top down. If you need to run blended learning programs or curated learning paths, all in the same platform. And that's providing a seamless user experience, modern user experience, seamless user experience, leveraging things like multi-channel or omni-channel approach through mobile and chatbots. You're able to access these learning resources across different channels. And the data view is consistent in the learning record store. So I'll go into that to demonstrate a couple of examples on that later on. But if you think it from the functional view, you don't really care about if some functionality is in the learning experience platform or some functionality is in learning management system. These system boundaries don't matter long as the experience is seamless. So when we think about our own product, for example, we start from the left side, aggregating, curating external content, the best of the breed content available. And then you have different channels for personalization, different channels and tools for curation. You put together external content in the learning parts, and you combine that with content that you created within the organization using our Lesson Studio authoring tool. And you're distributing that content through different means. If it's through microlearning, if it's more program or course-based learning, or events like blended programs, that depends on the use case, that depends on the personas, but everything's underlaid by the XAPI architecture, learning record store. So whenever there's a touch point or delivery of certain content or interaction, we get that stream of XAPI data in the learning record store, and we're able to visualize that. But it needs a combination of that organizational data and HR data. So the learning management side shouldn't be forgotten in all of this. So what does the learning organization look like will have a huge influence then when you're actually analyzing that data. So are we looking at country-based structures or functional structures or teams within the organization? Or is there a difference between how the organization describes itself and how it actually functions? We can surface all that if we have a good data architecture within the platform. And then these outcomes become significantly easier to define, that we're actually looking at upskilling in certain part of the organization that's being delivered through microlearning, or this delivered by leadership program through a MOOC type of course, or through a MOOC type of course, this immersive project type learning. And it's being consumed through these different tools, your digital workplace tools like Office 365 or Slack or others, where we have integrations and we're able to pull data from Workday and these other platforms as well. So this is what we think about total learning architecture. But I will go into some of examples. I wanted to talk also about the AI strategy for total learning architecture. And this is more our view and our research into this. But you have sort of three areas in that architecture and strategy. So you're talking about driving engagement and learning productivity. So we talk about high performance learning. You have different recommendation engines for recommending and nudging, and different channels like the mobile or the chatbot, or just the LXP part where you're nudging people to be engaged with content or find relevant content that's based on their skills or their data that we have about them. And then you have the whole area of predicting, classifying for business impact. So you're bringing external data and looking at the correlation between the learning engagement, that the high performance learning data overlaid with the organizational performance data, and looking at different predictive models, for example. But then there's the whole content piece. So a lot of companies have adopted natural language understanding, knowledge management for knowledge management and discovery. So we're able to tag content, but that's really sort of just the beginning point there. We think about bringing in all the different relevant resources within the organization, outside organization, and providing better access to content. I'll show you an interesting example of videos on that. But we're able to really understand the content and combine that then with what is the right content to recommend in a certain moment for a certain learner, and how that will drive outcomes in the business side. So you need to have these three different segments thought about in this scenario. It starts from the data. Well, you have data available, but a lot of these solutions and tools actually produce new data. And I have another example of that as well. So when we think about the recommendation, and this is the fundamental core, the core data, we need to think about segments. So we have different what's called features and attributes. We can start from all that HR data, that where is the learner located in the organization, what's their job role, where they're trying to go in the organization, preferred content. Then you have behavioral data added at the top of that. So what's the content interactions that they've had, sort of sequential data, or somebody calls it the knowledge graphs or learning graphs. We have data around that. You might have peer-to-peer recommendations, and you might have just custom algorithms on the business side that we're trying to help people in customer service. Now you're dealing with certain type of customers there, and we're able to get the segmentation data. So we talk about user segments and understanding the working context where we're trying to push these recommendations into. So it's not just generalist that we can recommend everything to anybody at any time, but these are time-aware or context-aware recommendations that we know what the people are actually trying to get to, what they're trying to do right now, and what is the relevant at this time for that user. And we're able to segment them into these categories based on these multiple attributes. And these will then influence things like search or the cognitive search side, the chatbot recommendations, or just the content they see on the platform. So it will have impact in the multiple sides of the learning experience, but really to have that data available and mapped out, that what are the features of learners that we really want to take a look. And again, you don't have a silver bullet in the beginning. You just have to go and explore what data do you have available right now and what you're able to do with that. What data do you have available maybe tomorrow or you're able to get in the future as well into this mix. So taking a look, another perspective into this data, we've talked over the years, we've gotten really excited about team of teams. So Stanley McChrystal wrote a book about team of teams, about how these different sort of research-based organizations worked in the past. We've had a lot of engagement around this with NASA folks as well, and how their research organization works. And essentially it's about flow of information altogether. And there's a certain view how organizations tend to view, which is hierarchical, and there's a different reality how things are, but then there's another reality how things actually work in these connected environments. And we've taken work from Alex Pentland that I'm a big fan as well, MIT professor Sandy Pentland. He wrote a book on social physics. So he's an MIT professor that's done really groundbreaking work on understanding social networks and social patterns from these networks. So this is an interesting data set to be combined with learning data, how people actually collaborate. So this data set is visualization on Slack communication data from one organization, that how people actually work together on a day-to-day basis. And this graph shifts from one day to another, how they're connected when they go to work with different initiatives, different projects and programs. You're able to extract a lot of valuable information, energy, engagement, exploration. And we've been able to actually see things like psychological safety from these communication patterns combined with learning patterns at the same time. So combination of social data with learning data, you're able to get into really interesting domains on understanding how this can influence effectiveness of learning, effectiveness of work and performance within the organization. Another framework that I wanted to introduce really quickly here is a knowledge action decision framework. And this is designed by Colin P. Shields from Center for Naval Analysis. It's sort of understanding that what are the touch points that we have as an individual, as well as a team and organization in the certain sets of knowledge within the organization, and what kind of actions are as a result, or behaviors are as a result of that interaction within knowledge, and then how that flows into decisions that will change the outcomes in the business side, or they can be design decisions at certain points. So this is another lens that we can look learning graphs and communication data and operational data through this framework. And we've actually done that. So here's just an example on organization or team going over time span in a learning program. We're able to see their learning trajectories. We're able to see their communication patterns, how they actually interact. So this was an immersive learning program, and you can see multiple teams on the left and how they essentially interact with the learning data and how they interact with each other. So we often thought about learning as an individual sport. It is not individual sport, it's a team sport. So this is a really interesting perspective then into how to build high-performing teams and what are the inputs from learning data, communication data, and skills frameworks, for example, in better organizational design or data-driven organizational design. So this is just one example what we've been doing on actually based on the total learning architecture or LRS data, understanding how these teams go through learning programs while they're doing a project together and trying to solve these problems and getting all of these interesting insights and outcomes out of that. Another view that I wanted to show is about content. This is something that we worked again together with NASA quite a bit, is to understand how the content is interconnected with each other. And in this case, we didn't use documents or learning resources, we used videos. And we analyzed those videos to identify moments of those videos. So the main problem was that typically these learning videos are 1 hour long lectures, and nobody's watching through 1 hour long lectures or 5 hour long lectures any matter. So we're able to extract using natural language understanding the certain key moments, and we're able to highlight here in the visualization how those moments are interconnected. So as the solution, we're able to actually search from them and recommend these moments in these videos. Here I'm just showing a simple demo of that I'm jumping in the specific part of the video based on that tool, based on that analysis, and we extracted all this information from that without any human interaction. So you start to get an idea as that what's the benefit of things like XAPI and this total learning architecture, that we get to understand how learning works in the organization, how it results in the business outcomes, and how we can actually get the content, information about the content and the knowledge in that into the mix to help create a better solutions for the learners as well. And of course, all these have feedback loops. So we've been able to think about use of the chatbot, and the use of the chatbot generates more data. So we're able to see what's actually engaging, when is that engaging, and what has been the previous activities and what are the upcoming activities based on that, based on those predictions. And very simple stuff that we already did back in the day is to understand the engagement distribution over time. So we're able to look from XAPI data, for example, at what is the typical time during the day that you're most likely to engage with content. You're most likely to engage with recommendation. And if we know that about learners on a personal level, we're able to start going towards finally things like the Ebbinghaus forgetting curves about nudging people with microlearning content at the right time about the right contextual information again and again, and which will result in the better outcomes. And this is a little bit of pun to sort of learning technology people that talk about AI and recommendation. This is where most of different recommendation engines still are. And my recommendation here would be that the organization looking to acquire things like learning experience platforms or are interested in the AI and recommendation engine, you should ask tough questions that, how does your algorithm work? Most of the algorithms work based on collaborative filtering. So this is very simple, that somebody has liked a specific content, and even though new user hasn't engaged with that new specific content, we're able to tell based on other interactions how likely they're to engage with something else that they haven't yet touched, based on the other feedback from other users. So this is what's called matrix factorization and collaborative filtering, which is very, very simple, and it's not highly effective. It is somewhat effective driving engagement, but not really learning productivity of all these outcomes. But we should get into more complex stuff. So you have collaborative filtering methods, and these are something that you can look up. This is actually a slide from Bruce Hardy from LBS that did an excellent course while I was studying at London Business School for data-driven and data analytics. But we moved much further into context-aware recommendation algorithms. But where we need to go is time-aware and sequence-aware. And if we have the data available from the organization, we can do that. But unless you have your data in one place and it's high quality, consistent, we're not able to move much further from just collaborative filtering, for example, if you just don't have the data. So total learning architecture will help you actually, and we're able to move past this. Where we should be today is to talk about things like deep reinforcement learning and stuff like that are really, really sort of tough, cool things to do, but we just don't have the high quality data from organizations. So we hope to do our own part in all of this, using our technology to produce high quality data, to provide that end-to-end platform where you have a control across different type of learning scenarios, and you have all the tools you need, actually replace a lot of different solutions in your learning ecosystem with one solution, which just makes so much easier to do some of this stuff that I just showed you. I'm gonna pause there. I think we have sort of 5 more minutes. I would be happy to take some questions. I do recognize that I went quite deep. I didn't promise anything else to you, but hopefully that was really useful. So you'll be able to take the data of learning workbook, start thinking about this kind of things in your organization, asking these questions, and then thinking about what is the iteration you need to do to your L&D strategy in the post-COVID environment. But we are at the really sort of forefront and the brink of a lot of really interesting stuff that can be done based on data that platforms like ours collect. So I'm very excited about the future as well. My colleague Katie is helping me a little bit with the questions. I'm not able to see actually your questions on the DDX platform, but I will jump back after the session there and take a look. And if you have any further questions and want to contact me, I'm available for any sort of conversations as well. So there's a question from Stephen. Do the network visualization require interface with communication platforms? So it depends on, so there was two parts in that network visualization. One was about learning interactions. So looking it through either individual or organizational learning or team-based learning, that what are these touch points within the learning graph or knowledge graph. And then the second side was communication patterns. So that data was from Slack, and there are standard interfaces which we can use to actually leverage that data and pull that into learning record store and leverage that in the analytics side. You can get the same kind of data from Teams as well. So while we've moved into this post-COVID world, it actually enables us to collect and get better quality data because everybody's working through digital means. Everybody needs to do their learning through digital means. And we're able to capture things like sessions like this and now analyze that using natural language understanding and generate more data and improve our understanding how to deliver best kind of learning and most effective learning. Okay, there's another question from Chris. Can you describe an example how social behavior and learning behavior data has helped guide designing of a learning program? For example, did Slack data help create teams to tackle a project? So actually it was other way around. So there was first a project, which was an immersive learning program, but then it was run on a virtual platform and collected all that communication data. And what we actually were able to do and use these tools to do is that there were multiple teams doing the same thing. And essentially, their goal was to build a certain thing and then in the end, see how it performs. And we had an R&D or research team from the customer side that was looking at the data and trying to predict which of these teams will have the best score based on the evaluation, the best outcome. They will create the most creative design that will work the best in the end. And they were able to use the data to do that. One insight from that was the psychological safety of those communication patterns and learning patterns. So if they were like these energy exploration engagement metrics, so what we saw exactly was people were jumping into their own private communication channels, and there was much less coherence across the learning patterns as well for those teams that had low psychological safety. So the really engaged teams that shared everything in single channel was an indication that this team has a good psychological safety. And they did post interviews with these teams as well to confirm this. And some of these teams had the best results and best outcomes of that project. There's a question from Mary. Can you tell us more about how to use the workbook and what will be included there? It should be quite straightforward. It is a conversational tool for you guys to map out the data needs and the reporting needs within the organization. But it will go towards what I was talking here about, this total learning architecture, that can you identify what data do you have available and from there deduct what data you need but you don't have. So this should help you guys in the future, in the short-term planning, to think about, do you have the right kind of technology in place? Do you have right kind of tools in place, or are you missing some parts of that data components or analysis components that you have in your learning ecosystem? I think the final questions are just that people enjoyed the deep water dive. I really thank everybody for participating, and hopefully you'll have a great experience in the DDX. I enjoyed this throughout yesterday and today very much. I look forward to interactions with you. Hopefully next year we'll get to meet face to face as well. Thank you very much for you, and have a great day.